you just joined, we're gonna wait a minute or two to let folks hop on. Alrighty, well, welcome, folks. My name is Jerome Richardson. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator at Reconnect Rondo, and I'm very happy to have you all here joining us today as we'll be talking about our NEPA study. I want to also introduce the organization, Reconnect Rondo. We were founded in 2017 as a restorative justice model, an economic justice model, development model for the Rondo community, uh, certainly tying together the past and the present of the Rondo community. And so we've been hosting these webinars to share with community what sort of findings and advocacy approaches that to essentially drive forward this restorative development approach to Rondo. And so you'll learn about NEPA and our process there and what that means for not only the organization, but the community. And all of this certainly ties together. A lot of our webinars are available on YouTube, so you can watch other webinars that talk about our previous studies and formulate yourself that way. Without further ado, I'll be also introducing our executive director, Keith Baker, who uh, has been in the nonprofit and has been experiencing private and public non-sector work for more than 35 years of his career. Started off 18 years in the Minnesota Department of Transportation and oversight of federal and state professional technical contract administration and construction compliance monitoring. Over the years, he has identified and executed strategies supportive of equitable development, entrepreneurism, ownership, business, and workforce, and opportunity and access. As a strategist, connector, and influencer, Keith has a reputable and has a reputation for seeing the big picture along with connective links needed for genuine progress. He's known for skillfully navigating within constrained environments and creating outputs that result in equitable outcomes. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm excited for you all to learn and hear about what we've been up to and certainly about the organization. And so I'll pass it to Keith.
Thanks a lot, Jerome. I'm so glad that you're all able to join us at this presentation around NEPA.
I'm
Um,
seeing your speaker notes, so can I walk you through just getting out of that real quick? Can
Hang
you
on, let me
tap your X in the top right on the top right there of your screen?
trying
The way
to
top right
come.
corner, there's an X.
It's
Connect.
yep, there you go.
Hang on just a moment.
And then when you reshare your screen, you're gonna press start from beginning on the top bar. You'll see a start from beginning on the top bar.
Um, let's try it this way. I'll go back
Yes,
to.
I can get to start from beginning.
Nope, still doing it.
Start from beginning
Hang on, let me go down below here
down
from.
to the three dots. Hold on, man.
Yeah,
The three dots, and then right, it's almost there. You see it down there? The three dots.
yep, I was just on the three dots.
And then you're going to press, when you get to there, because I can't see if your cursor's there or not, you're going to press speaker view or presenter view.
It's actually good
That's
right now.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. Hang on
Okay, you
just a
got it
second.
now?
We'll try it one more time here. My computer is acting a little more than funny here today, so excuse the.
More patient, don't worry.
We're all good. Yeah, it's doing what it wants to do today. One moment.
Show presenter view. Yep.
Got it. All right.
All right,
Well,
we in there.
welcome to the webinar. A little bit of team building doesn't hurt. Just appreciate the opportunity to present our our studies, in particular the NEPA study, but just want to ground everyone first in terms of Reconnect Rondo's kind of perspective on what this opportunity presents related to the Rethinking I-94 process. We see this transportation opportunity and the uh, corridor itself as Rethinking I-94 as an asset or a tool. It's somewhat counterintuitive because it's the same asset and tool that was viewed um, ultimately that destroyed the community that we believe very, very important for us to leverage as an asset and a tool to build community. And I think we've got a wide range of folks in different places of their understanding. We know that this corridor and the impacts to Rondo has been significant, but we do see it as an asset to leverage as we know that investment will take place along this corridor. So it's really leveraging a transportation element for sustainability and community building. A lot of you all are familiar with the Rethinking I-94 project. The corridor is 7.5 miles connecting Minneapolis and St. Paul. And we recognize that while the Department of Transportation is the principal driver of all transportation elements related to I-94, we also see that Met Council, the City of St. Paul, and Ramsey County all have a stake in the decision-making process, whether they serve on the policy advisory council for the Department of Transportation or they are realizers of whatever the development or improvements are along this corridor. The mission of the organization is really important because it's to revitalize the community of Rondo, leveraging an asset, and that asset is a land bridge, to reignite a cultural enterprise district, which was Rondo before the freeway had come through. What I'd like you to do is just imagine, as part of our plan, is how do we connect Minnesota leaders or organizations within community kind of moving forward? So imagine descendants, residents, small businesses, elders. The next sphere of influence on this project is the nonprofit ecosystem. The next sphere on top of the nonprofit ecosystem or around are the jurisdictions themselves, state agencies, the governor's office, and the federal government. So all of these spheres have various roles, responsibilities, or influences on a project like this. And it's important that we look at the layers and the complexities of what it takes to move a project forward and what it means for that project moving forward to be beneficial more directly to communities. Also, I think is important is to recognize that because Reconnect Rondo is a nonprofit organization, we are moving forward with the notion. Excuse me, can I get the iPhone DX4 1146 to mute? Thank you so much. Appreciate that. What we really ultimately are attempting to do is to do planning around transportation or city or county or larger regional organizations do this work very differently with community being at the center of pushing this effort. I also think it's important for us to really put some historical context. Reconnect Rondo didn't just surface, without a full appreciation for community and the voice of community. So if you can see in 2009, the idea of a cap and lid emerged. As we proceeded to 2015, there was a formal apology given by then Senator, City Mayor Chris Coleman and then Commissioner of Transportation Charlie Zelli. I point this out because the subsequent 2 years isn't until the time that Reconnect Rondo surfaced as an organization. We've secured $6.2 million to kind of do this study and other studies to kind of support our efforts across the board. But you can tell that our journey has been long and we've reached a particular point where we're introducing the neighborhood area plan, which has also been a part of our work that kind of is interconnected with the work that you're about to have presented here today. So, as I've mentioned, we've done a host of studies to get to this particular point. What we aspire is the creation of 21 acres of new land. On top of that 21 acres of new land in various locations geographically, the potential of 468 to 576 housing units, 1,000 new residents potentially, looking at marketplace, square footage space for businesses, and revenue that potentially can be generated into the city itself. And that's the early work that we did in our feasibility study that is noted here. I do think it's important for also me to provide at least some understanding of the neighborhood area plan, which takes into account our anti displacement community investment strategies. It takes into account uh, the restorative development modeling that we've done, because the key question that we have to ask ourselves is how do you restore a community that's been devastated by a freeway? These are 950 communities across the country are similar to Rondo in that the freeway went through and took out housing, businesses, almost the social, cultural, economic, civic, and spiritual fabric of a community. And so the six elements that you see before you: transportation, mobility, parks and open space, environment and resiliency, culture, history, and art, housing opportunity, business incubation opportunity. These are the things that we see as possible when we create 21 acres of new land. But the other thing that I think is important for us to really recognize is that the city's got a comprehensive plan. Met Council has a 2040 plan. The county has an economic competitiveness plan. Our neighborhood area plan, considering anti displacement focus, community investment focus, with an understanding of an umbrella of restorative development, is really how we are moving this particular project forward. And it's also critical to recognize that there are ways in which this program can really be about addressing past harms, but setting conditions for the future overall. If we can just imagine what 21 acres has the potential of bringing about. This is just an illustration to give people an idea of how we intend to proceed to make sure that we're meeting community outcomes, and communities certainly are the drivers of what might come about. I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers. These are two individuals who are working as consultants for Reconnect Rondo. I will say they are one of a team of eight. One of the things that's important is for us to always have the expertise on our team that can help deliver. So let me start off with Beco Associates. Bill Smith is the founder of Beco Associates and the principal in charge of this firm's land use, transportation, planning studio, and community engagement. He earned his master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Iowa in 1986. And further, draws on his experience as a professional organizer within communities as early as 1975. He's been heavily involved in a host of projects. He brings to the table some specific expertise, and that expertise really spans to transportation, land use, looking at commercial corridor revitalization plans, neighborhood level transportation planning and traffic calming studies, bicycle and pedestrian planning, environmental analysis, and so on. So he brings a great degree of wealth and experience to our project. I also want to introduce Dan Lubin. He's a planner with Beco Associate, has experience with numerous transportation and community planning projects. He's earned an Urban Studies Bachelor's of Science from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. He did so in 2016, and he also holds a Master of Urban and Regional Planning from the Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs. With that, I want to introduce the two. Bill and Dan, you have the show.
Okay. Well, thank you, Keith, for that introduction. Today, we want to focus on describing some of the work that we've completed thus far. When I say we, I'm talking about what we're calling the NEPA study team, and I'll describe some of that work a little bit later. But first, before we launch into the work that we've completed, I would like to provide our audience with some history on the National Environmental Policy Act, and then briefly describe the approaches that are available to us as we're completing that document, in other words, how we can do this environmental investigation. I'd like to go over as well our study area, the work we've completed thus far, and then the main purpose of our presentation today is to share with you what we have come up with for the draft project purpose and need. And let me emphasize, there are two areas that we're looking at. Number one, a transportation-related purpose and need, and then what we're calling additional programs, additional purpose and need. And those are purposes and needs that relate to non-transportation kinds of issues, more social, economic, and environmental, and ecological, I could say. Finally, the last thing we want to do after that is to audience with some reference documents that you can check out if you're interested in learning more. Let me get the next slide. On this history of NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, it was enacted by Congress in 1969. Nixon signed it and made it law in 1970. It happened because the United States, across the country, we were in peril, environmental peril. As you can see from the photographs, there's smog in New York, there was smog in Los Angeles, there's a river in Cleveland, Ohio that spontaneously combusted. There were scrap yards everywhere. The United States was environmentally in peril, much more than today. One of the key things that contributed to the environmental movement was freeway construction across the country. And also what we found is that it is through protest that America made progress on the environmental front. It just didn't happen. People had to get out in the streets and protest in order to bring about these changes. Often what we found is that the environmental impacts that we were hoping to address were really disproportionately impacting minority communities and marginalized communities. So we found in the cities, on reservations, on Indian reservations, in areas where low-income white people were living, this is where the federal government's environmental impacts were the worst in many cases. Let me get the next slide, please. These are the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act. Number one, and this is where we are today, and what I'd like to spend the most time talking about, the number one important thing is to define the purpose and the need of the project. Number two, we are to consider, as part of the NEPA requirements, optional approaches so that we just don't investigate the environmental consequences of one approach to solving a problem. We have to come up with alternative approaches. Number three, we want to do an investigation to determine what the impacts are of all the alternatives. And then finally, number four, a chief requirement is to involve the public. And NEPA lays out pretty precisely, these are the steps that you need to take to involve the community, involve the public. We have made a commitment on this project to exceed those minimum requirements that are in NEPA. And so we'll talk more about that as well. Next slide. NEPA gives us three general kinds of ways to do environmental investigation. One is the categorical exclusion. Usually this applies to when there's so few environmental impacts that you really don't need to a full-blown investigation. Again, a categorical exclusion. Number two, an environmental assessment. And then the third is a full-blown environmental impact statement. So you can see there's these approaches are kind of related to the severity and the anticipated impacts of the project. We get the next slide. We have decided on this project that the environmental assessment is the best way to go. And when I say we, again, I'm talking about the NEPA study team, and I'll tell you about those folks in a moment. But the environmental, let me go backwards, Keith. You went too fast for me there. Back up one. Keith, can you go back one slide? What's happening?
Bill, I'm working on it right now.
All right.
Can you see fine? The machine just got a life of its own.
Uh-oh.
Here, I'm going to go down again, and then I'm going to
Okay.
come back up. Not quite sure why it's got a mind of its own today. Is that helpful, Bill?
Okay, and it is this is the slide that I was talking about.
Okay, you saying my notes or your notes?
We can see your notes.
Okay, so let me just see if I can. I am not at all clear about why this has taken place today, but it certainly has decided to do its own thing today. Let's go again. Coming back, Bill. That helpful, Bill?
I can see the gallery of folks attending the webinar. I do not see
Is that
the
better?
slideshow yet. There, I see the slideshow.
Great. Sorry about that.
Okay, I think we're on. I'll pick up where I left off, folks. Our team, which I should mention, must have combined experience of at least 100 years, has sort of looked at this, and we said, the environmental impacts that we're anticipating to occur are probably a little bit too significant in order for us to do a categorical exclusion. On the other hand, the environmental impacts that we're anticipating to occur are not significant enough that we need to do a full-blown environmental impact statement. And so we have settled on starting with the environmental assessment. And that will enable us, that process that's outlined, will enable us to coordinate with the agencies that are important on this project. That would be MnDOT, Federal Highways, Keith talked about housing, so we'll need to coordinate with HUD. He talked about ecological concerns. We'll need to coordinate with EPA and other agencies as well. There's national parks. Each of those agencies has requirements that need to be met when you're completing NEPA studies. We'll be able to build on the plan that was prepared to restore the neighborhood, which is currently going before the Planning Commission and Council in St. Paul. And we'll get guidance from that plan on how to develop the alternatives, the options, if you will. We will be able to creatively address social justice issues. And we can talk about that a little bit more. I hope someone raises a question about that before we're done. We'll be able to meet and exceed the community engagement requirements. I mentioned that. And here's the other thing. At the conclusion of our environmental assessment work, we, in our professional opinions, are anticipating what we're calling, what is in fact called a FONSI, and that is the findings of no significant impact. If we have a FONSI, that means that we do not need to go further with environmental investigation. If, on the other hand, we find through our analysis that we'll conduct for the environmental assessment, well, there really are some serious impacts that we need to look at, then we'll investigate those further in a full-blown environmental impact statement. And at this point, our professional judgment is telling us that we'll be able to achieve a FONSI and that the environmental investigation can stop. Okay, on to the purpose and need. The purpose of the project as defined in the NEPA process, it describes the general objectives, what we're hoping to achieve when we build this project. Number two, the need. The needs are just simply the problems and the issues we hope to address, that we will address when we implement the project. Next slide. Okay. The purpose is, furthermore, the purpose sort of justifies the project. It defines goals, it informs options, and this all comes into play as we begin to develop the options, or as we say in this business, the alternatives that will be evaluated during NEPA. Let me get the next slide. Next, please. We are into this. So again, there are two, we have decided, we're recommending that there are two purposes, two levels of purpose for this project. The first is a transportation-related project that will address transportation-related needs. The second level purpose is social, economic, and environmental purposes that will address social, economic, and environmental needs. Because the primary purpose of this project is transportation-related, we are anticipating that the Federal Highway Administration will be the lead federal agency in reviewing and accepting our results. Next slide. This is where our work has been taking place, and I'd like to describe this to you in a little bit of detail, so bear with me. You can see the blue that is overlaid over Interstate 94. The boundaries of that blue are Syndicate and McCubbin, and then north and south would be St. Anthony and Concordia. We're calling that area the project development limits. This is where the primary project would be constructed, somewhere within that area, not outside, not beyond, but somewhere within there, the project would be developed. Let me give you some more boundaries there for context. The black border is the Rondo neighborhood, and the red area is the traffic study area. That was the subject of the webinar that was presented in the month of April. The work that was done by SRF and the Transportation Collaborative Group was done within that red dashed line. Within that, and I should tell you too about the work that's been done thus far. I mentioned SRF and the Transportation Collaborative Group. They have been doing the traffic analysis. Also on our team is the 106 group. They've been doing a cultural and historical review analysis. We've got members of our team, the Full Circle group. They've been looking at architecture, planning, and urban design within this study area. And then there's Young Environmental. They've been working on water resources and water and environmental and ecological issues within this. And then Beco Associates, we've been leading the work on the NEPA study, but we're additionally addressing land use issues within this study area. Okay, the next slide, please. This is the work that's been completed thus far. Data collection, field investigations. We've done some analyses of existing conditions, and we've begun work on the purpose and need. Okay, if you would, please. And with all that fanfare, here is what we've come up with for our draft purpose and need at this point. Number one purpose, enhance and/or reconnect existing transportation linkages and potentially create new linkages. Also, improve one-way frontage roads, St. Anthony and Concordia or Rondo Avenue, to accommodate local and freeway-oriented travel demand. And we think as well to sort of address existing transportation needs in a comprehensive rather than piecemeal fashion. These are the needs that these purposes will address. There is a safety issue out there. There is a mobility issue out there. There's an accessibility issue. And overall, there's sort of a general efficiency and convenience of travel issue. So these are the purposes, the primary transportation purpose. These are the primary transportation needs. There are these, well, before you do that, Keith, let me go back. These are needs. There may, in fact, be more. We're continuing to do this research, but I do want to focus on the most glaring of the needs. And you will clearly be able to see why the traffic needs are so important and why they need to be addressed. Now the next slide, Keith. As I mentioned, SRF and the Transportation Collaborative Consultants Group have been working on traffic studies within our study area. But prior to their work, the city of St. Paul did some work where they investigated crashes, safety issues in the entire city of St. Paul between 2018 and 2022. Take a look at these heat maps. This map on the left shows out of the entire city of St. Paul, look and see, people, where the greatest number, the highest frequency of crashes is. Likewise, look at the map on the right. Out of the entire city of St. Paul, look and see where the greatest concentration of fatalities, traffic crashes related to serious injury and fatalities. Look and see where that is. Next map, next slide, please. Likewise, the entire city of St. Paul, look and see where the greatest concentration of, with the exception of downtown, where is the greatest concentration of bicycle crashes? Likewise, next map to the right, with the exception of downtown, where is the highest concentration of pedestrian crashes? As you can see, there is clearly a traffic safety issue in the Rondo neighborhood and in the influence area for Rondo. Where we want to conduct, where we want to do a Reconnect neighborhood project, wouldn't it be wonderful if while we're doing that project, we are addressing these traffic safety needs? Let me see the next slide. Further evidence. from that study conducted by the city of St. Paul. The table to the left shows the number of between, what is it, 2011, is it? I have a little hard time reading that myself. 2018 to 2022. These are the 20 signalized intersections in the entire city of St. Paul with the highest rates of crashes. Isn't that crazy? That 8 out of the 20 worst are in Rondo? And then look at the table to the right. This is out of the entire city of St. Paul, the 20 street segments that have the highest rate of crashes. Lo and behold, 10 of the top of the worst 20 are in Rondo. So I think it's going to be pretty easy for us to demonstrate that there is in fact a transportation safety issue that needs to be addressed. And this project to reconnect, to improve connections between the north and the south sides of Rondo that was torn apart by the freeway, we can address these problems at the same time we're improving connectivity between the north and south sides of Rondo. Let me move to the next slide. I've probably gone too longer than I should have. I did mention earlier that the transportation purpose and the transportation needs, those are our primary ones. But now closely related are the purpose and need for social, economic, and environmental issues. And I'll turn that over to Daniel.
Thanks, Bill. So as Bill mentioned, these purposes here concern the social, economic, and environmental issues we've identified. And for the purpose and need for this program of projects, we've identified 4 purposes that support RCR's overall mission to develop a reconnected, more livable, and prosperous neighborhood. And these are improve housing supply and affordability, support employment and economic development opportunities, reestablish community connections, the street grid across I-94, and mitigate environmental challenges. Next slide, please. Now, these needs draw heavily from past work done by RCR, including the neighborhood area plan. So at right, you'll see the elements of the neighborhood plan that these needs correspond to. So firstly, we have housing needs. We've identified that residents and households are indirectly displaced due to higher housing costs. There's an adequate housing supply resulting in increased costs. And there's also a particular lack of certain housing types, including community-centered, intergenerational, and youth housing. There's comparatively low home ownership rates since the construction of I-94 and an aging housing supply. Next slide, please. For employment and economic development needs, we've identified a lack of investment in physical and social infrastructure for economic development. And one of those deficiencies is in broadband infrastructure. Upcoming legislative and policy mandates require some upgrades, and there's limited capacity for certain types of enterprise and entrepreneurship and remote work operations. Also, a comparatively large proportion of residents commute outside of the neighborhood, so there's a need for more local jobs, and there's a lack of commercial and employment land uses, which has a downstream impact on tax rates. Next slide, please. For community connection needs across I-94, there are inadequate north-south freeway crossings for pedestrians and cyclists that require longer pathways to cross the freeway than just moving between city blocks on either side. There's limited dedicated bicycle and pedestrian linkages between the parks and in the surrounding neighborhood as well. Next slide, please. And finally, for environmental and ecological need, Young Environmental identified there's limited stormwater system performance, there's high impervious surface coverage, and a lack of distributed stormwater management practices, and also localized flooding in certain areas of the neighborhood. Additionally, there are areas where there's limited tree canopy and vegetative cover, which overall reduce ecological function and climate resilience. Now, the project presents an opportunity to address all these needs, and we're also still continuing our existing conditions work, and these may be added to as the project goes on. I'll hand it back to Bill to talk a bit about what's coming next.
Good. Let me get the next slide, Keith, please. So what's next? One of the things that you'll notice that we used in this presentation, and you'll hear often when you're talking to consultants who are working on these kinds of problems, we often use the word draft or preliminary. Well, let me tell you, everything is draft until it says final. And that's a good thing, because that means that we are constantly refining our work when we get new information. So we're going, and our coming up next, we'll be completing our existing conditions work. That's going to help us to refine, modify the purpose and need. Likewise, today, with some of the questions you may ask, we'll be taking that information into consideration and possibly refining our purpose and need based on input we received today. Coming up soon, with early in the month of June, the consultant team is going to be developing the preliminary alternatives. And again, options is a word that's most frequently used in our work. We call it alternatives. We'll be looking at the neighborhood plan to help provide some guidance to us as we come up with these alternatives. We're going to screen and evaluate those, and we're going to select alternatives to carry into the next phase of our work, which we'll talk about. I think we're ready for the next slide. And here we have some references. I assume that this slide deck will go out to people, and when it does, you can check out these references if you'd like to learn more about the National Environmental Policy Act, how citizens can become involved, and specifically what the Federal Highway Administration requires in their NEPA studies. And I think we're ready to open the floor for some questions now.
Yes, we are. So thank you so much, Pico Associates, to Bill and to Dan. Without further ado, we'll do questions. If you have any questions about what you heard today or the grand scheme of things at Rondo, we're happy to answer them. Keith is here to answer questions, as well as our technical team. I guess also, since Lynn is here, feel free to chime in. Keith, do you have any final remarks before we transition it to Q&A?
Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to say, as I mentioned earlier on, MnDOT is going through its own process. Our project is separate, but has to follow the same rules as those applying to MnDOT's Rethinking I-94 process. Hopefully, at some point, both of these processes will meld together in some form or fashion that will be mutually compatible and supportive. But I do want to indicate that there are 4 alternatives that MnDOT is moving forward with recommending through their documentation process. All of those 4 are compatible with our idea of a land bridge. We will be putting forward, as Bill has mentioned, alternatives in the context of the land bridge and not about rethinking I-94 per se. And I think it's important to distinguish our processes, but also to understand that we're required to follow similar processes, and those requirements come down through the Federal Highway Administration. So that's really all that I wanted to add in terms of a clarifier. I I see Ayawa, Iawa, Evans, Miss Evans,
It's Iowa.
Iowa. Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
No, you're fine. It's like Iowa, the state.
Got
But
it.
uh, thank you for allowing me to ask the question. But there was a lady who asked a question prior to me,
Okay.
and I don't mind waiting.
In the
She was in the
chat.
chat.
If,
Trying to-
if you want to unmute Minister,
Again, say what?
I think one of the questions in the
Glennsmith.
chat is how does Rondo interact with the city consultants? I think that's the only question that I see in the chat from Minister Glenn Smith.
Oh, okay, got it. So, oh, I see you're from Baltimore. I thought I saw that photo in the back of your shot on Zoom. Thanks for joining us all the way from Baltimore. As you know, we're pretty familiar with the freeway to nowhere is what it's coined there, and I certainly am happy for you to join us. I would probably say initially, as a nonprofit driving the project, we're able to bring the city, the county, and Met Council and the Department of Transportation around the table together. We don't know which of these agencies will be our lead partner agency yet. We know MnDOT is responsible for the corridor. We also know that the city has some responsibility and some benefit from it as well. So they are at the table. We meet pretty regularly. We have a project management team specifically that is facilitated to make sure that they're at the table having conversations. I think where we're moving into right now is having conversations to establish what we would term to be an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. And that would be between ourselves, the city, the county, possibly Met Council, and the Department of Transportation, but that's a little ways off. The number one thing, though, about that MOU is to establish some common vision, some common understanding, not necessarily around the land bridge itself, although it could hold some of those components. It really is about what are we all trying to accomplish? What are the outcomes we're all trying to get at? And I've already referenced the city's comp plan, the county's economic competitiveness plan, as well as Met Council. We need to umbrella ourselves or embrace ourselves around this common vision, what our collective goals are, and then from there, as the process continues for realizing in our idea a land bridge, we will get to some of those further discussions around the structure, then the development, and then what we see the benefit outcomes being. So I appreciate your question because I know you all in Baltimore are navigating relationships with the city and the DOT as well.
Thank you for that. And I really enjoy um, time coming in with you guys. You guys have done a great job putting some things into place. And I want to join with the national organization that you have so that we can kind of follow your lead because you guys are further ahead than we are.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate so much the comment. Okay, Iowa, you're on.
Thank you so much. I just had some questions about concerns that we raised when we were working on the Reconnect Rondo with the community.
Hmm.
And if you look at the photo, which is just, a rendering at this point,
Hmm.
you see how the cap is placed over the interstate. And with the housing that would be developed and also the neighborhood schools in the area, and I've walked this area for many, many decades doing community work with the Summit University Planning Council. I
Hmm.
worked at Rondo, what is it? ASNDC.
Hmm.
We did a lot of community meetings as well.
Hmm.
And, there's I appreciate that you're adding in the information that you're going to study about, the pedestrian side as well, because I mean, back in those days, I walked. Now I'm in a mobility chair, but I've
Hmm.
seen community members struggling with their mobility chairs or, rollators trying to cross. But the other concern that I have is if you build housing on top of that cap, how do you plan to mitigate the uh, emissions particulates from the freeway that will impact the housing and the school system that are in that area. Because I know that there were many days that I couldn't even come out to go to work because
Mhm.
of the emissions where the traffic was stalled on the interstate. Thank you for my question.
I appreciate so much your question. You have a lot packed in, and there are a couple of things that we can probably respond to, and some are just unknown right now. But let me start off with the traffic study that we're currently engaged in, and that traffic study is also doing air quality, air monitoring, air analysis. Because we do know that this is a major issue. So we have at about, or will have, 7 different locations reading air quality in different locations along the corridor. So, yes, our eyes are on that, and it's important. The second piece that I want to at least tie in here, vegetation matters. And vegetation is a natural absorber of carbon emissions. If we think about what's percolating from the freeway and distributing in terms of carbon, it is, no question, an issue and concern. So we do think part of the mitigation certainly isn't going to solve the entirety of it, but part of the mitigation is really having a tree canopy. And Bill had mentioned a little bit about that a little bit earlier. And this is all somewhat factored into our neighborhood area plan. While we don't have the physical picture, as you know, of what the land bridge is going to actually look like, and our picture was more a rendering, what we do have to figure out is exactly what's that balance of canopy of trees and vegetation that we think are important. The other thing that I think you raised around housing and embankments. Again, we can't tell you the geographic location of where a house is going to be or where living space is going to be just yet. We haven't gotten that far. But there are some ideas that are being discussed. Some of those things are going to require some further engineering work, some further analysis of location. We both, those of us that know about the Rethinking I-94 corridor, is there are embankments along the side of the freeway. Perhaps the housing is to the outside with more open space into the inside. And that's a possible option as well. The last thing I'll say in terms of mobility, yes, you're absolutely right. It's tough to get around. It's tough to cross. It's tough for anyone who's walking or biking or using any kind of assistance in that regard. And know that when we talk about the mobility of folks, we're hoping to address just also that you're able to get to the resources and the things that make quality of life improve in a 10-minute walk, a 5-minute walk. So hopefully what we're looking at overall is trying to anticipate what we think is going to be a comprehensive response to those challenges that communities face. And we've done the analysis, so we're really up on the impacts that people are facing with the freeway currently being present. Let me pass to Bill if you have any comments in the context of the environmental analysis that you all are pursuing.
Keith, I think you've covered it pretty completely. I can just add really quickly that we will be developing preliminary options, and each of those options will be evaluated, and one of the criteria against which they will be evaluated is air quality. So it's an unknown at this point, but I think your comment is well taken. We're taking notes on that, and we'll make sure that we include air quality in the analysis of the alternatives.
Thanks, I appreciate your question.
I I I appreciate your answers, and they're very responsive. With the housing piece, when we had the green line put in, and we had to even sue to get that. And I lived on Lexington and St. Anthony. One of the negative side effects of that being on the grid is that we were always losing our power. And I lived in a building, and I mean, the whole city blocks would be out because of the drain. And so, Minnesota's a very harsh climate in the wintertime. And so, if everything in your home is electric, including your heat, and it goes out, this is an aging community as far as, people wise.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed there, you know, for life. Many of them do. And it's like, those are the concerns that stay on my mind. And I followed the project, um, very closely. And
Yes.
so
And
it's like, is there a consideration of how housing would impact the grid, or are there any plans to update that grid?
well, I just love your questions. Let me just also say the city of St. Paul is currently looking at street improvements, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
also we're leaning into conversations around technology. Bill had mentioned our technology feasibility study. One thing that's really important to recognize is all utilities, or a lot of the major utilities, run along I-94. There are 14 service providers of fiber optics that run right along I-94, but not one of them serves Rondo. So, to your point of connectivity, not just physically because of a land bridge, but it's also about access to services, resources, and so on that we're taking a look at it pretty comprehensively. I see Bjorgvin's on, and I'm going to put Bjorgvin you on the spot here for a moment to really talk a little bit more about restorative development and maybe talk a little bit more about technology, connectivity, grids, whether we're talking water or whether we're talking energy consumption or generation and capture.
Okay, yeah. Oh, hello, everyone. It's so good to be with you. And I think I should maybe put that in context with what Bill and Dan were talking about for the NEPA study for the bridge. When we are building a technical marvel like this bridge will be, restorative development is really about making sure that technical marvels just don't, strand there. But instead, we're going to feel the impact that the system can produce for the people and to make industry companies more competitive. Quality of life, other things that we can measure instead of just always carbon footprint or something very linear. Restorative development is really about multiplying equity, not moving equity around, if you know what I mean. One cannot take an equity from another and call that success. This is our historic past, especially in Rondo. And restorative development is about making sure that we do these things simultaneously. That's the way Reconnect Rondo is applying restorative principles into the whole project. So nothing is done in isolation, but that we make sure that when we make investments in transportation, that we will also improve quality of life, access to equity for residents, build health in. And Keith, you asked me still to mention maybe how it can play out technically. And I think there was Iowa who asked about, someone asked about the pollution, in the
Sure.
tunnel under the bridge. But once we isolate pollution, and Keith alluded to it, pollution is misplaced nutrients that can be used in vegetation. So restorative development in Rondo, the way Reconnect Rondo is applying this is by capturing these emissions. And we can do that in a closed environment like a bridge in a tunnel. We can capture this pollution and convert it into materials through fish farming and through urban agriculture. And there are community programs, in these spaces there that just need scalability, for example. So now we're connecting technical advancements with economic development, job creation, but then we have to think about, we just don't want to create jobs, but we think about quality of jobs, what they pay, what's it like to work there, etc. So just maybe, I hope that's enough of an input, Keith.
No, I appreciate so much. So,
Yeah.
Iowa, you've really raised and invited us to kind of share much broader information than simply about the NEPA, but just what you point to and what you're allowing us to really communicate is how comprehensively we're looking at this opportunity and how we want it to translate into actual and direct benefits. And the other thing that I just want to note is you're talking about your house. You're talking about your everyday life, and you're connecting our project to how to improve your basic environment of living, your basic quality of life. And oftentimes we do projects like this, but we don't really consider the day-to-day articulation or story that you're sharing with us today. And I'm glad we had an opportunity to really connect those real things that you deal with every day with this larger idea and project opportunity. Are there other questions that maybe
Thank you.
others may have? Oh, you're welcome. I guess we're at the tail end. I'm not quite sure. Um, Transit components. I will mention also that we're part of MnDOT's alternative process is to look at various mobility options, transit options, etc. The answer is yes. We're paying close attention to mobility overall, and we'll be following very closely not only what comes out of Met Council, but what MnDOT decides in terms of its alternatives, as well as what we think our neighborhood area plan speaks to around the category or the transportation element or the element in our neighborhood area plan that focuses in on transportation and mobility. So definitely.
Well,
Jerome, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
thank you. If there are no more questions or if something comes to mind later, you all are able to reach out to Reconnect Rondo. All of our emails are available on our website. I'll put my email in the chat. Far as community engagement goes, there will be a number of things coming up in the summer where you all can convene and interact with each other, kind of like similarly in this way, where we're having conversations and dialogue in webinar forms. We intend to bring people together as well. So, more learnings and more opportunities. If you'd like to watch the recap of this, you can check us out at YouTube at Reconnect Rondo, where you can also, as I mentioned before, see the previous webinars we've done. If you're not signed up to our mailing list, you can also do that. And any communications you've received, you can sign up for it at the bottom or do it on our website. Thank you all for joining us and thank you all for attending. Goodbye.